Okay, we'll just start now, and I think we have a good number of participants. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 2026 OMP Call for Projects Workshop. My name is Cynthia Morales, Principal Transportation Funding Analyst here at OCTA, and I'll be serving as your moderator for today's workshop. With me, I have Charvelyn Alacar, Local Program Section Manager, Paul Rodriguez, our consultant who will provide an overview of Project O, then Amy Tran from OCTA's Traffic Operations Team who will go over the Project P program updates and supplemental application. Today's presentation is being recorded and the recording will be posted online after the workshop. A PDF version of the slides is also available on OCTA's website with the link provided in the chat for reference. Next slide, please. Okay. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. Questions will be answered at the end of each section. If you're calling in, please press star 9 to raise your hand, and I will unmute you to allow you to ask your question. Attendees, you may write down your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to your questions at the end of each section. On today's agenda, we'll cover the call schedule, the CTFP guidelines and resources, the limited submissions, and a detailed overview of each project and the application process. At the end of the presentation, we'll also have time for additional questions. Next slide, please. 2026 call schedule. For this call, the schedule has been delayed by about a month from the usual timeline. If any agency will be submitting a route project, a draft route application is required and due by October 23rd. Project applications are due Thursday, November 20th at 5 p.m. No late submittals will be accepted. The review process will take place during the winter with funding recommendations expected in spring 2026. Next slide, please. Please use the link provided to access the updated 2026 CTFP guidelines. Chapters 7 and 8, covering the RCP and RTSSP, were recently updated and approved by the OCTA board. While the changes for Project OMP are relatively minor, it's important to use the most current guidelines when preparing your application. Next slide. So on this slide, we're providing the call resources. One link is for the Project O webpage. The other one is for the Project P webpage. There you'll find the call schedule, the recording of this workshop, OC Fund Tracker, user manual, and both current and prior year CTFP guidelines, plus other additional resources that you might find useful while submitting your application during this call process. And with that, I'll turn it over to Charvelyn. Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so I just wanted to go over this specific topic about limited submissions for this call, or what we're calling a limited call basis. So we're asking that agencies only submit applications for projects that, that they really need to be considered this call. So specifically, if they have, if they're tied to any external time restraints, or if they're pursuing perhaps the countywide baseline project incentive, since this is the last call, as Amy will mention, that they're being offered. So just to provide some context as to why we're asking agencies to only limit application submittals to those that really need to be funded through a 2026 call. So earlier this year, in the May timeframe, we went to the OCTA Technical Advisory Committee, so the TAC, and we asked if there was a possibility if we could potentially look at deferring this call or canceling a 2026 call, but the TAC felt it was very important that we maintain an annual offering of the call for projects. So we essentially were making this ask because OCTA is working on focusing on, reducing the CTFP payment backlog for these grants, and also implementing over 30 30 recommendations regarding the invoice process streamlining endeavor. So I think as you have all noticed, if you've been here before, we started the call about a month later. So we decided to move forward with the call with limited changes to the guidelines. So only really changing the time frame and the schedule, but with the understanding that, hopefully agencies will only submit those projects that really are critical and really need to move forward at this time. So this will allow, our staff to be able to focus on issuing those CTFP payments, really reducing that backlog and implementing all those improvements on a go-forward basis. So please keep that in mind as you are looking at as you're preparing your applications. Let us know if you have any questions. And I think that sums it up. I'll turn it back over to Cynthia.
Okay. Are there any questions regarding what Charbel just covered? If so, please write them down in the Q&A. If not, we'll move on to Paul. I'm not seeing any questions. Okay. So we'll pass it on to Paul. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be providing review support throughout the process. My task today is to highlight certain elements of the current call for projects. While some of you have participated in the past, others are new to the process, so we'll try to be sensitive to that. Next slide, please. This call provides funding for improvements on the Orange County Master Plan of Arterial Highways, with programming spread over fiscal years 2026-27 through 2028-29. There is no formal project maximum cost. However, the graphic on this slide shows that soft caps are in place for the initial ranking, shown as Tier 1, with the balance of funding distributed thereafter according to competitive ranking. Essentially, this means that projects requesting $5 million or less compete first against projects in the $0 to $5 million range, while projects requesting more than $5 million compete against similar sized projects. This way, we minimize the potential for high cost, high scoring projects absorbing all funding before smaller projects have an opportunity to compete. The M2 ordinance requires local agencies to provide minimum match funding of 50%, but includes provisions to reduce this match rate when certain conditions are met. Many projects earn the maximum discount allowable. LSSP compliance has already been confirmed for all agencies based on their 2023 submittal. So all agencies are going to qualify for that reduction. Applicants may offer a higher match rate than the qualifying minimum in order to earn extra points. We refer to this as overmatch. Although M2 could consider up to 75% funding when all match rate discounts have been earned, final programming cannot be used to supplant development fair share responsibility. For instance, if you have a direct impact mitigation requirement or an impact fee program that identifies a fair share responsibility, no portion of that fair share assignment can be funded by M2. When in doubt, reach out to OCTA. Next slide, please. Project O includes these three categories. Arterial Capacity Enhancements, aka ACE, covers typical roadway widening or extension projects. LOS is a standard of measurement for all ACE applications. Capacity volumes are published in the CTFP guidelines. Modeling requests for new facilities must be submitted to OCTA by October 9th to be considered. Again, the modeling is only for facilities that don't currently exist. Freeway arterial streets transitions, or FAST, cover improvements on arterials as well as ramp intersections. Improvements to the mainline freeway are not eligible. LOS or ICU is the standard of measurement depending on the proposed scope. Intersection capacity enhancements, or ICE, include capacity and operational improvements at MPAH to MPAH intersections. ICU is a standard of congestion measurement used for all ICE applications. HCM or an alternative methodology may be considered on a case-by-case basis, but this analysis must be presented to OCTA for review no later than Thursday, October 9th, and must be in addition to the ICU standard. The early deadlines are in place to enable review and resolution of analytical data prior to the application submittal, the formal submittal, so that conflicts in interpretation don't arise during formal reviews. This is especially critical given the limited scope and shortened review period for this call. Next slide. In order to limit the potential for project funding delay requests and ensure timely delivery, we continue to use a sequential programming approach. Applicants may request environmental and/or engineering funding, which we refer to as the planning phase. Your application may include both aspects if it's appropriate and enables you to implement the project in a timely manner. Right-of-way and construction phase funding can only be requested once a project is environmentally cleared and final PS&E is substantially complete. We refer to this as the implementation phase. Right-of-way and construction funding do not need to be requested in the same round, but they can if you feel that the right-of-way is relatively not complex and you aren't likely to meet any delays. Most projects that have right-of-way tend to split the right-of-way and the construction phase among two separate rounds. For projects that have no right-of-way needs and the engineering scope is relatively small, applicants can request funding for both planning and implementation phases where sequential funding would inhibit timely delivery. This fast track option is used sparingly and includes a restriction that the project will not qualify for a future funding request. So if you're considering fast track, be careful what you ask for. Let's chat about it before you submit the application. Next slide, please. During this cycle, as was mentioned earlier, no changes to scoring or scope have been made. The real focus was on dates and deadlines. They have been updated to reflect the limited nature of this call. Electronic submittals are required. We are not accepting hard copies, nor do we need hard copies at this time. Your primary application is made through OC Fund Tracker. Supplemental materials such as traffic counts, cost estimates, and whatnot identified in the application checklist should be uploaded within the application. You have that ability within OC Fund Tracker. Files may also be provided via download, email attachments, or flash drives for redundancy. That should not be your primary basis for submittal. Next slide. It's your turn, Cynthia.
Okay, if anyone has any questions at this point, please write them down in the Q&A box. As of right now, I don't see any questions, but we'll give it a moment. Okay, I don't see any other questions.
Okay. Okay, so let's transition into Project P, alternatively referred to as a Signal Synchronization Program, or TSSP. I'll hit the highlights and Amy will cover some of the more detailed information. Next slide. This call provides funding for signal synchronization on the Orange County Master Plan of Arterial Highways spread over fiscal years 26-27 through 28-29, similar to Project O. Applications cover a 3-year period. This typically includes 1 year for primary implementation, such as engineering, timing plans, and capital improvements. Operations and maintenance typically cover years 2 and 3 of the grant. There is a 20% match requirement. In-kind match, eligible expenditures, and other project scope details are discussed in Chapter 8 of the CTFP guidelines. Match rate discounts referenced for Project O do not apply to Project P applications. Lastly, OCTA cannot act as a lead for projects proposed during this round. All proposed projects will need to be led by an applicant agency. Next slide. And I should mention just real quick, there is an opportunity at the end for questions. So if we're going too fast, hold those questions and then we'll cover it at the very end. The proposed corridor or grid must be on the MPAH. And I think, most everybody's signals are located on a master plan of our Area Highways facility. This slide lists minimum requirements as outlined in the program guidelines. Amy will walk through details of Project P now. Next slide.
Thank you, Paul.
Mhm.
So next slide, please. So as mentioned earlier, OCTA will not be leading projects this cycle. We will reevaluate next cycle. For those who are new to our program, OCTA is currently leading a project called the Countywide Signal Synchronization Baseline Project, where we are retiming about 2,500 signals in the county. So in order to take advantage of that project, we're offering a waiver to all participants. If you have full baseline participation, meaning all the signals on your application are part of the baseline, you can choose to waive the data collection, signal timing development, and implementation tasks. However, they must all be on the baseline to qualify. And if you're unsure, feel free to reach out to us and we can help check that for you. And since you are a baseline participant, you will receive full points for your offset signals, and you will also be able to apply for improvements on those offset signals, but we will not increase your cap. So your cap based on your main corridor will be the cap for the project. Regardless of baseline participation, you're still responsible for the before and after studies, as well as the O&M phase. So make sure you include budget for that in your expenses. So since Caltrans is not a baseline participant, you're still responsible for their signals if you have them on your corridor or route or grid. So make sure you also budget for those tasks in your expenses. Next slide, please. So as Paul had mentioned, for O, it's the same for P. There are no real changes to the guidelines except for the dates and deadlines. And again, we are only accepting electronic applications. Next slide. So onto the supplemental application, we did some minor updates and corrected some formulas. So you'll notice the biggest change on the cover page will be that everything but the date will be auto-populated now based on information that you provide in section 1. Make sure you update the date. That really helps with version control. So if we're reviewing a draft, we'll make sure to reference the correct date so you know which version we're talking about. Next slide. Section 4C has been updated, so now you will see the Caltrans timing fee show up here. So in this example, one agency has Caltrans cooperative agreement, the other one does not. So you'll see why one agency has the fees, the other one does not. And in this situation, you will not be able to claim Caltrans as a participant because not all the agencies included the Caltrans co-op. Next slide. And as a reminder, Caltrans is not a baseline participant, so the countywide baseline project will not cover data collection and timing, implementation, and optimization for Caltrans signals. So you need to make sure your budget includes money for those tasks. And the current supplemental application is assuming you're not selecting the waiver. So the formulas are set up that way. So if you are going to go for the waiver, make sure you adjust the formulas to reflect the correct calculations. Next slide, please. All right, so Appendix E is where you would include additional information to help us evaluate your application. If you have lump sum costs in Table 2, such as TMC improvements, this is where you would provide the breakdown so we know what the lump sum includes. Please do not include the CTFA guidelines, MPAH map, other large documents that are not going to help us evaluate your application. Next slide. And then finally, reminders, we are available to help you review your draft application. Please use this service. We'd love to see your application ahead of time to check for any critical errors. and make sure that you're using the correct template. 2026 is the only one we will accept. So if you submit it in the wrong template, we will not consider your application. And then there is a guide on the call website that you can use to help you fill out the application. There's also a sample at the very end of the guide to show you what we're looking for in your application. Again, cabinet photos are not required for agency-led projects. And then make sure you double check all formulas and auto-populated fields to make sure nothing got changed during input. Last thing I want to point out on this slide is your counts must be recent. They must have been taken after November 20th, 2022. That's very important. If you have older counts, your application will not be accepted. So make sure you have recent counts. And then the rest are pretty much the same from previous cycles. Next slide, please. And I'll pass it back to Cynthia for Q&A.
Hey, Amy. Okay. Our first question. Okay, guidelines mentioned 32 million available for Project O. How much is available for Project P? You want to answer
Who did you want to take that?
that? Paul, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, the board approves funding as a block, if you will, and those are distributed among Project O and Project P. A typical distribution is about 30 million to Project O and about 12 to 15 million in Project P, depending on the capacity for and the desire for applications. We may or may not meet those limitations, and there have been occasions where the board has taken an action to offer more funding available based on the applications received, in particular on Project P. So a rough estimate is between 12 and 15 million dollars for Project P. But if we have a number of high qualifying projects, that final funding recommendation would be considered, brought through the TAC and the steering committee, and then ultimately to the board.
Thank you, Paul. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any other ones. Okay, no more questions. Amy? Are you done with your sections? Now we're going back to Paul.
Yeah.
Okay.
Back to you, Paul.
Yay! Let's go to the next slide. Since we're not getting a lot of questions, I'm going to try to create some controversy in the rest of my notes. I'm teasing. Charvelin, I'm teasing. Okay, so for application reviews, just as a reminder, applications are due on Thursday, November 20th by 5 p.m. That's a strict guideline. Don't push it. We haven't had issues in the past, but we're on a really tight timeline now, so there would not be any flexibility. Consistent with prior calls for projects, applicants will need to use OC Fund Tracker, as we mentioned before. You'll need to use that to complete your application. If you don't already have a login, please contact Cynthia and she will help you out. If you've been managing projects, you probably already have that login. You don't need new access. After logging in, you'll select CTFP and there's a link for a call for project. So you'll follow that prompt and then you'll create a new application. If you want to access an application already in progress, when you go through that main menu, you will see a category that's called Applications in Process. So you can always start and stop an applications as you're going through up until the point where you click on the button at the bottom that says Submit to OCTA. And so we always encourage folks, don't submit to OCTA until you're all done, you've done the draft reviews, you've got all your questions, and you're truly ready, and that you had an opportunity to do QA/QC on your application. If you need any help navigating the application pages, please feel free to reach out anytime. Cynthia or myself can help you. Each program has a checklist of required documentation. For Project O, you'll see that in Chapter 7, and it'll go by phase and by program. Fairly straightforward. There's no surprises there. It's the same checklist that we've been using, but you need to make sure that you're following that checklist. Make sure to include a copy of the supplemental application for Project P. You can't just submit an OC Fund Tracker. The OC Fund Tracker is useful for us to understand what applications are being submitted and to cross-validate against your supplemental, but all of the technical detail is in the supplemental application. Conversely, don't just submit a supplemental application. You have to have gone through OC Fund Tracker. So what we've seen in the past is we've seen applications filled out and the scoring sheets left blank in OC Fund Tracker. So what it does is in the system, it is applying these phantom scores for a project that won't match your supplemental application. And if you're doing a true comparison and a quality control, you are looking at the score that is being generated out of the supplemental application and the score that's being generated out of OC Fund Tracker, and they should match. And if they don't, just simply highlight that for us. I will clarify. OCTA uses the OC Fund Tracker as a guide for the scoring for each program's Project O and Project P. We have a scoring model that does not have any errors. Every once in a while, there's something happening in the background of OC Fund Tracker, and it's possible you'll end up with something where the score is just slightly off. And we always use the model. The model is the guiding control for all evaluations. So just make sure we've got the right data, and then we have a process that will a feedback loop at the end that'll say this is the score, this is how we've evaluated, and you'll have an opportunity as an applicant to say there's still a mistake. We're not on the same page. Let's get that corrected. And it's an iterative process and it's a cooperative process. So just recognize good data means good scoring. Bad data means we have no idea what it is you're asking for. Additional resources such as guidelines and templates are available on OCTA's website as noted here. And next slide. Keep in mind that we're always available to discuss your project or review draft materials before submittal, as Amy mentioned. We encourage that, and I would say fewer than half agencies submit those. Every once in a while, it's okay that they didn't, but usually we've got errors as we're going through the evaluation process. So take advantage of that. We're not sharing your secrets. We're not distributing your draft materials to your competitors. We want to make sure that the application that we receive and the application that we're evaluating are a true reflection of what you intend and the merits of the project. So we want to make sure that that it's accurately reflected, especially for those projects that are complex. You know, as Amy mentioned and as Cynthia mentioned, if it's complex, just recognize we have 1 month fewer in this round to do reviews. So if it's complex, we cannot complete your review in order to stay on track to be awarding funding. So if you've got a complex project, there's anything interesting or provocative about your application, let's sit down and talk about it. We can arrange those meetings in person or virtual. This, like I said, it's especially important because of the shortened nature. And when you're using alternative methodology, you want to make sure that we've had an opportunity to see it, react to it, give you our feedback in terms of how we're going to interpret it so that there aren't any surprises during the review process. We want to be very transparent in this process. Your application should be clear, concise, and complete. There are no glamour points for pretty applications, but materials should follow a logical flow. I appreciate Amy's comment earlier. We have received applications that include a complete copy of the CTFP guidelines as an attachment. OCTA created that document and does not need to see that in your application package. All pages that you include in your application package must be reviewed by the reviewers. We get audited for that. So if you're going to submit CTFP guidelines, we're going to have to note that we saw that in the package and we acknowledge that they were there. The same thing goes for a large, like an environmental document. We do receive documents or packages from time to time that'll have 500 to 1,000 pages of environmental clearance documents. We do not need to see that. We need to see the highlights. If it's something we need to see, we will request that, but don't spend a lot of time trying to either duplicate, scan, or upload those large files. Just make sure that we have those summaries available. The review process does include an inventory of required materials, followed by qualitative reviews. So once you submit your application within a very short period of time, we go through to make sure that the items that you included on your checklist are actually in the package. We do not do a qualitative evaluation there. So if you include a document that says it's something, we will mark that we received something. We will not tell you that it's a problem, that it's wrong, that it's missing pages. We won't know that because we haven't gotten in through that process. But you will receive an email from OCTA or from myself with copies going to OCTA that we're missing document X, Y, or Z. It's not a problem, but we do expect due diligence and your best effort in submitting your application. Then we go through the qualitative reviews. Qualitative comments are generally distributed in early to mid-December. In this round, given the shortened time frame, it's going to be in early January. So we've lost that month, but you can enjoy your Christmas holiday knowing that we're not going to submit some gotcha questions, on Christmas Eve and need it by New Year's Day. So that's a process that we're going to be following. Next slide, please. So common mistakes, I've been doing this for a number of years. Many of you have been involved in this, and these are going to look familiar. There are some common mistakes that we see each year. Make sure that you're using the correct and up-to-date materials. It isn't unusual for us to see something that's a little bit outdated or the wrong form or a form from a prior year. Just make sure that you're doing your due diligence. Ensure your application is complete. You know what materials are included. Don't submit an application that requires a traffic count and doesn't have a traffic count. That's gonna slow our process down, and then we cannot move forward on certain things until we have that information in hand. We'll give you time to get it to us, but we have to set that application aside till we've got full data. We do inventory those materials, and we will follow up with you. But again, the responsibility is yours to ensure that it's a complete project. Traffic counts must have been taken in the 36 months preceding the application submittal. We cannot accept anything older. For Project O, only counts less than 12 months old can qualify for escalation to opening year. So for those long lead time projects that maybe aren't going to be developed until or constructed until 2030, you do have the ability to escalate your traffic count, but the traffic count can't be an old traffic count. It's got to be relatively recent. So just be aware of that. Existing congestion is the most heavily weighted category for Project O. Level of service and ICU calculations must conform to the guidelines, and backup is required. If you're using incorrect data, your application will likely have an initial score that is overestimated. And if you have miscalculated in this category, which typically is 25% of your points, if you've entered it wrong, you may end up with a fantastic score only to find out that, hey, maybe this wasn't as solid or meritorious of a project. So just be aware of that. Do not use lump sum values on capital improvements in Project O. We see that a lot of, often it's roadway widening, $2 million. Okay, there's a whole bunch of things that need to be included. Make sure that you're breaking out the level of detail that you would expect to include in a bid package. Confirm that the funding requested does not cover development's fair share responsibility. If your legislative body chooses to charge less than the maximum allowable share, the fee program cannot be backfilled by M2. That's an ordinance issue. This issue has arisen on a few occasions during the fast few rounds, and adjustments needed to be made during the programming process. So just be aware of that. If you have a concern or you have a question, reach out to us. We'll be happy to help. You are not prohibited from leveraging developer contributions or requirements in an application. You just can't replace their responsibility. Secure Caltrans concurrence prior to submittal of an application that affects state facilities. This is most often related to fast applications. So we cannot consider an application that comes in, even if it's for a planning phase, if we don't have something from Caltrans that says, hey, we're aware City X is is thinking about doing some ramp widening. They don't have to say, and we support it. They have to say we're aware of it and we will be engaged in the process. So they are acknowledging that they're aware of it. If we get an application for a fast project or something that is related to a a state facility and we don't have that, we cannot move forward with the project. We'll let you know that it's missing. If we don't receive it through the review process, we will not make a conditional recommendation for future concurrence. We need to have that up front, so just be aware of that. For Project P applications, make sure you include all signalized intersections. If you've got a corridor, don't skip an intersection or don't not name an intersection, even if you don't need to do improvements. Chances are you're going to need to do something there and include it in your studies. Ultimately, we want you to be successful. So we won't know on day 2 of the call when applications are being developed, or even as we're going through the review process, we won't know how much we're going to be able to fund. We won't know that until it's ready for recommendations to go to steering committee. We're aware of applications that cities are considering. We don't have any scope. We don't know if there are others that are going to be coming out. And I know there's a desire to understand how competitive your project is. We can tell you based on history. If you've got some questions, we will try to help you to make sure that your project is accurately reflected and that you are entitled to all points. If you submit an application and you aren't claiming an attribute that is clearly included in your scope, we have recommended changing elements in your application to reflect the scope. What we do not allow is a modification of the scope after the application is submitted for the purposes of generating a higher score. So corrections are corrections. If you miss something and it's included in your scope, we'll give you credit for it. If you've included something and it's not in your scope, we're going to take it away. We won't give you the opportunity to revise your scope to match the application. So hopefully that's useful information. Again, we're here to help. OCTA is ready for draft reviews, one-on-one meetings, and other virtual consultations. We wish you success. If you've got any questions throughout the process, always reach out and we'll be there for you. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. So next slide. So it's just a Q&A. Right now we have time for any questions. So Paul, a question for you. In prior years, a technical review and comments are provided with a fairly quick return deadline. May we request additional time this round, possibly a 2-week buffer?
Sure. So depending, we try to gauge the due date based on whether we think the questions are complex. When we issue something on a Friday, and then we usually will give you till the next Friday. In all instances, when a city has said, "I'm going to do my best," and then they reach out to us and they said, "I need an extra week," we have never said no. So we'll establish a consistent timeline for those things. If it looks like there are some complex issues, we may pull you offline. There have been occasions where there were some potentially fatal flaws with applications, and we do not wait for the qualitative review comment distribution. We'll reach out to you early on to say, "Hey, this is missing something pretty significant. FYI, you don't have to resolve it now, but you should expect in a couple weeks you will receive a formal comment, and this is kind of your early warning system." So we try to make sure that we're not backing you against the wall, but we are open to changing it. What I would say, from my perspective, is that we wouldn't summarily offer everybody 2 weeks, because then we won't get even the most basic comment until the 2-week period. And once we issue those comments, we're on hold until we get responses. And because we've shortened the review process by 1 month, there isn't a lot of latitude in adding additional time towards the end. We simply don't have that flexibility. In the past, we've tried to send qualitative comments out as early December, which gives us a long period of time to go through multiple iterations of responses. So, again, happy to work with you in terms of turnaround time, but the challenge for applicants is, let's talk early. Let's go through the draft documents. Let's identify any potential issues, any potential questions, and let's try to have the cleanest application that we get. And the more OCTA knows what to expect and what they're going to see, the easier the reviews tend to be. We're not looking for things that we've never seen. Projects that we've seen are typically a little bit more straightforward. I hope that helps. But the message is we're open and flexible and want to make sure that you have the best opportunity to be competitive, but we ask that you're sensitive to the time as well.
Thank you, Paul. So another question for me is, when will resolutions be due? So finalized adopted resolutions are due to OCTA sometime in February, depending on when you go to council, but we need to have it by February. Any other questions? Okay, Paul, question for you. What is OCTA's preferred method of reviewing draft applications?
Typically PDF, but if you've got, we can review it in any form, whatever form folks have. It's usually going to be a PDF. And by the way, on those on the draft reviews, we strive to get comments out within 24 hours. And I would say probably 75% of the time that we're able to do that. It's easier if it's earlier in the day. If it's in the evening, it might take a little while, or if it's complex and it's policy related, it's going to take a little bit longer because we're going to need to make sure that that other groups that need to weigh in have an opportunity to weigh in. But let's see what you got.
And we want them to email it to Cynthia, right?
Yes, all comments, all drafts should be emailed to Cynthia. Feel free to copy myself, and on Project P stuff, Amy. Cynthia is the clearinghouse for comments received and making sure that we're on task to getting those comments reviewed. And I will say that there are occasions where, especially on a complex project, that we'll do field reviews. And we'll do those, as time permits. So the sooner we know that there's something going on out there, we try to do that before the applications are in, if we're aware of it. Otherwise, we've got to do that during the review process. They're not detailed. We just want context, and it actually has helped. It has benefited a city. The applicant does not need to be on site for that. That's something that we're capable of, walking around and taking a couple pictures and then asking you questions.
Thank you, Paul. Any other questions? Please feel free to type them in the Q&A box.
Cynthia, may I pose a follow-up question to Brianna's question?
Yes.
So Paul mentioned preferred method is through PDFs. Paul and Amy, does that also apply to the supplemental applications for Project P? Just want to clarify that.
I'd also like to see the Excel file just because sometimes things get cut off in the PDF, especially the different cells. So having the supplemental will help me be able to see everything that they have in there that got cut off.
Yeah, and because that, just to supplement that, because that particular application component is driven by formulas, it's helpful for us to see if there's a bust in the formula or there's an issue. So I agree. The Project P, the Excel is really useful.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Charvelyn. I'm not seeing any other additional questions. Are there any comments or questions at this time? Give everybody a little bit of time. I'm not seeing any more. No more questions. Okay. Can you go to the next slide, please? So here is mine and Paul's contact information. As mentioned, Paul and I would be the leads for this year's OMP call for projects. Please feel free to contact us, email us, call us to set up any meetings, or if you have any other questions. I'm not seeing any more questions. Are there any other comments that maybe the panelists want to mention before we end today's workshop? No? Okay, well then that concludes today's workshop. Thank you everybody for joining today. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.